Hello, my name is Henry Keane. This is News Bulls at UATV. Welcome to the daily episode. Today in the show, Ukrainian drones interceptors have set a new record of downing Russian UAVs. Putin is scared, and if not, he should be. Russian oil industry brings less and less money after Ukrainian strikes and ceasefire in the Middle East, and it is all just getting started. New axis of evil in action. Viktor Orban proposed Hungarian help to Iran. Ukrainian forces have destroyed last Russian ferry in temporarily occupied Crimea. It was hit by drones. As the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine reports, the ferry Slavyanin was part of the so-called Kerch crossing. It was used to transport the fuel, lubricants, weapons, ammunition and military equipment to the temporarily occupied peninsula of Crimea. This is not the first strike on this ferry. In March, it sustained damage during another operation but remained afloat at the time. Now, however, the ferry has been completely disabled. Break the enemy's backbone. Military Chief Alexander Syrsky says in March the total personnel losses in dead and wounded of the Russian army increased by almost 30%. According to him, Ukrainian defense forces maintain the strategic initiative and are preventing Russian troops from resuming a large-scale offensive successfully.
For 4 consecutive months, starting from December 2025, our unmanned systems units have been neutralizing more enemy personnel than Russia is recruiting into its ranks. Thus, in March compared to February, the total personnel losses inflicted on the enemy by Ukrainian unmanned systems units increased by 29%. Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on Telegram.
New records of Ukrainian interceptor drones. In March, these deadly little machines successfully downed more than 33,000 enemy unmanned aerial vehicles of various types. This is twice as many in February. This were reported by Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov. According to the minister, the key challenge is jet-powered Shahed drones, but the enemy is, of course, ramping up the use of these drones, making their interception even more difficult.
Our task is to find a technological solution. Together with manufacturers, we assess their products and level of readiness, identified bottlenecks, and synchronized efforts to enable rapid scaling. Interceptor drones are a Ukrainian innovation that has already emerged as a key component of our air defense. Mikhailo Fedorov, Minister of Defense of Ukraine.
And global oil prices have plummeted following the US announcement of truce with Iran. They have dropped below $100 per barrel when vessels resumed passage through the Strait of Hormuz. But even so, not for long. But when it happens again, at some point in time, it will double down on the pressure on Moscow, creating multiple opportunities for cheaper alternative to Russian oil, further straining Moscow's revenue. Simultaneously, Russia's export volumes continue to decline due to continuous Ukrainian drone strikes on key ports. Meanwhile, Russian warships have begun escorting Shadow Fleet's tankers through the English Channel after British Prime Minister Starmer recently pledged to intercept these vessels. All these cases affect Kremlin's economy directly. Learn how exactly in the following story.
Russian oil refineries are shutting down one after another following drone strikes. Specifically, the Norsy facility in the Nizhny Novgorod region, owned by Lukoil, halted operations after an attack on the night of April 5th, reports Reuters. This is Russia's 4th largest refinery and one of the major producers of gasoline. At the same time, Russia's export infrastructure is also under attack. Following the drone strike, oil shipments through the Shestkaris terminal at the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk were halted. Earlier, there were also disruptions in the operations of key Baltic seaports. Against this backdrop, Russia's energy sector is facing growing instability. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that these strikes are justified as they directly reduce Russia's oil revenue.
Our long-range sanctions continue to work very effectively and significantly reduce Russian income, primarily from oil. This is entirely justified, and most importantly, it limits Russia's ability to prolong the war. Only significant financial losses will force Russia to consider a scenario for exiting the war.
However, even without considering attacks on infrastructure, the situation for the Russian economy remains difficult. Global oil prices are showing after statements by U.S. President Donald Trump about a possible ceasefire with Iran, oil prices dropped, and the price of oil significantly decreased. Against this backdrop, the Russian stock market opened with a decline. Shares of Russian oil and gas companies started trading lower. This is critical for Russia, as oil and gas revenues remain the key source of budget funding. However, the expected profits from rising prices, as anticipated by the Kremlin, have not materialized. Analysts note that even amid price fluctuations, the Russian budget has not received additional super profits.
It is likely that oil and gas revenues will exceed 1,100 billion rubles by the end of April-May. But this doesn't fundamentally solve any problems for the Russian economy. It doesn't cover the record budget gaps. The budget continues to collapse, and the economy is sinking deeper into recession.
These concerns are supported by data from Rosstat and the Ministry of Economic Development. After a more than 2% decrease in January, Russia's GDP fell another 1.5% in February. By March, the economy had lost all the growth shown last year, which was estimated at 1% by Rosstat. Russian analysts are no longer hiding their concerns and openly state that the risks of the Russian economy experiencing a deeper downturn are increasing.
Retail turnover is rapidly losing momentum. According to Rosstat, its growth slowed to just 0.3% year-on-year in February, while paid services to the population grew by over 2% year-on-year. This weak dynamic is no surprise. The economy continues to cool, and there are specific factors affecting major sectors. For example, for cars, it's the increased recycling tax and an oversupply of new models from previous years. Among the more unexpected factors cooling consumer activity is the sharp halt in the growth of consumer crediting. From Focus Pocus, publication on Telegram.
Additional pressure on Russia's revenues is coming from Western sanctions targeting the so-called shadow fleet. This refers to hundreds of tankers that Russia uses to bypass sanctions and transport oil without Western insurance or control. In recent months, EU countries have increased their control over these shipments. Sanctions are now targeting both the tankers themselves and the companies involved in oil transportation and insurance. As a result, logistics costs are rising, delivery times are increasing, and some tankers are being taken out of operation. Experts note that even with high raw material prices, the destruction and restrictions in logistics prevent the Russian Federation from benefiting from this opportunity.
Their situation is indeed very bad, because oil prices are high, but he can only sit and long for those prices, because logistics have been destroyed for the most part. This explains why Putin was asking oligarchs for money at the RSPP Congress, and why the Ministry of Finance postponed the execution of the budget rule until July 1st. They simply do not see the prospect of filling the budget from these high oil prices. They are not allowed to benefit from these prices, largely due to Ukrainian strikes.
As a result, the growth of the Russian economy has slowed to minimal levels. It is rapidly losing stability amidst sanctions, falling oil revenues, and systematic strikes on energy infrastructure by Ukrainian drones. Reported by Maria Zhelutchenko, UATV News.
If one ever hesitates what to call Viktor Orban's political position, one must be sure this way or the other it's always anti-democratic, anti-freedom and anti-terrorist. Don't believe me? Just watch Orban helping terrorists and fanatical murderers after they finally got what was coming to them for years. Right soon after the deadly Israeli attack that caused thousands of Hezbollah terrorist pagers to explode in September 2024, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government offered its assistance to Iran, and the key sponsor of Hezbollah, considered a terrorist organization by the United States.
Our Secret Service has already contacted your services, and we will share all the information we have gathered during the investigation. Every possible document will be shared with your services. Peter Szijjártó, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary.
How sweet of Szijjártó. Szijjártó told this to his Iranian counterpart, Abbas Araghchi, by telephone, according to a copy of Hungarian government transcript of the September 30th call, obtained and authenticated by a Western intelligence service and reviewed by the Washington Post. Further quoting WP, the call itself and Szijjártó's apparent readiness to curry favor with Iran's foreign minister pose uncomfortable questions about the Orban government's relationship with Iran at a time when the Trump administration is locked in conflict with Tehran, while at the same time the White House is providing open and direct support to someone who supports Iran, Viktor Orban, and his re-election campaign in a high-stakes election. And Hungary is not the only one providing help to fanatical dictatorial regimes. Fanatical dictatorial regimes are happy to help themselves and each other. President of Ukraine Zelensky confirmed that Ukraine has a solid intel data that Russian military satellites photographed critical energy infrastructure in Gulf states and Israel, as well as the location of the American bases across the region, and passed that data to Iran to enable strikes.
I said this publicly. Did we hear a reaction from the U.S. to Russia that they have to stop it? The problem is they trust Putin. And it's a pity. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, an interview with Alistair Campbell on the Rest is Politics podcast.
Well, it looks like these days we're literally watching a new axis of evil being built, but most unexpected, and unnatural alliances emerging. Who would ever expect that the US would be way more keen to support those who kill American soldiers than a country where American soldiers are actually fighting for the very values enshrined in the American Constitution?
What I would say to both the Russians and the Ukrainians is, we're talking about haggling at this point over a few square kilometers of territory in one direction or another. Is that worth losing hundreds of thousands of additional Russian and Ukrainian young men? Is that worth an additional months or even years of higher energy prices and economic devastation? We think the answer is clearly no.
Well, maybe Comrade Vance is right. Maybe it is just a few square kilometers. Even so, in fact, it is 115,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian land occupied by Russians during the last 4 years of a full-scale invasion, while Hungary is 93,000 square kilometers occupied by Viktor Orban for the last 16 years. But again, if J.D. Vance considers that much of illegally militarily occupied Ukrainian land just a few square kilometers, then maybe it is. Not a reason for war, just land, right? But it should be easy to see if both Vance and Orban are genuine in what they say. Ukraine might agree to let go of all of that land, but on one condition. Orban and Vance agree to let go of their private property that belongs to them proportionally. Well, that should be okay, right? It's just a few square kilometers in the first place. Well, that's it for today, folks. I'm Henry Keane. Thank you so very much for your time and effort and attention. We feel it in Ukraine. We need it, and we appreciate that a lot. I also would like to ask you to comment, like, and subscribe to our channel. Let's see what the next day holds for all of us, shall we? UATV will be posting you on that. We're Ukrainian Perspective as usual. Thank you so very much, and stay tuned. Goodbye.